I've got one more question for you about, or just line of questioning around consumer credit before we move on. And I did want to present as well, just kind of the devil's advocate here, because the flip side, right, of everything that we're talking about, there is some data to suggest actually that, I mean, this is not, as bad as many
Yeah.
like this. So the two data points that I think are worth pointing out is what you basically have on the left here is credit card spending versus debit card spending. And you can see that, I mean, the idea just being what are people spending in terms of credit versus what are they spending in terms of cash they actually have. And that hasn't changed overly much in the last, let's say, 2 years. That we're showing,
Hmm.
May of 2019, May of 2021, and May of 2022. It's about the same. And then the other thing, too, is that we're looking at the household debt service ratio, which is something that people pay a lot of attention to. And that's actually at pretty lows. So right,
Yeah.
that's they as a percentage of people's disposable income, how much do they have to pay in terms of their mortgage each month, and that's going down. So I think that's why people are not. That's the flip side to everything that you and I just said. I would say one other area to just be aware of, for consumer credit, is the buy now pay later phase.
Oh, yes.
So this is a pretty interesting area, but maybe you guys have seen this when you're checking out now from something like any of these like e-commerce kind of sites. You have this option to don't buy now. But you can buy now, but you can pay later,
Yeah.
right? And there are these companies that have sprung up like Affirm, Klarna, et cetera, that have gotten like screamingly high valuations. And basically, the idea is that in the same way that you can take on debt to buy a house. Well, you can finance purchases of increasingly small consumer items, right? And I think this really kind of got started too. I mean, got started way before this, but that you can kind of see that making sense with like a Peloton, right? But now, I mean, you can literally do this on like $100 purchases, right? So it's very, very low. And this is still a relatively small, part of the market. But I mean, there's an estimate that for 2022, there's going to be, over $180 billion worth of items that are bought, financed essentially in this way of buy now, pay later. And one of the tricks about this is that the business model for these companies like the Affirms of the world, the Klarnas of the world, is that they're securitizing this debt essentially, right? They're packaging it in the same way that they did for in the great financial
Hmm.
crisis where they had a bunch of different tranches of mortgages. Remember that they paid these CDOs. They
Hmm.
essentially securitized the debt of these consumers, which no one is doing credit checks or anything on these, and they sell these. And crucially, that data is not included in this consumer credit data that we've been reviewing. So it's hard to know this. I was really digging into this, but it's hard to know if this is like subprime data. It's getting tossed around that comparison,
Hmm.
but it's certainly not. You wouldn't call it solid. You wouldn't call these people solid borrowers, right? And it's something like 42%. In a firm's case, have like missed at least one payment, right? So it's not very solid data. I'm curious, Mark, if you dug into the buy now, pay later stuff.
I mean, thankfully, we avoided the mania around this. The stock prices went straight up, and all the hedge funds jumped in, and and now they've gone the other way, and then they're down 75, 80 plus percent. You know, it's like most things in life. This is not new, right? I mean,
Hmm.
what is a credit card? A credit card is buy now, pay later. And
Yep.
this is just taking it from an unknown schedule that you determine, right? You can determine how much you want to pay on your credit card to, okay, now you're going to have these four payments set up on a periodic basis. So I don't really get the allure. I guess it's a little better UI UX, and it seems like it's something new, but um, I I don't get it. I mean, to avoid paying credit card interest, you're paying interest to these companies. You realize that, right? I mean, I I just don't understand. I mean,
So, guys, for those of you who are just following on via audio, sorry, Mark, I'm just gonna, this is a chart for this is a poll that was done Insider Intelligence about reasons why U.S. consumers use buy now pay later services. Top four reasons: number one is to avoid paying credit card interest. That's about 40% of people. Two, to make purchases that otherwise wouldn't fit in my budget, which is 38.4%. Not great. Three, to borrow money without a credit check, which is about 25%, which is also not great. And four is just I don't like to use credit cards. So I'm kind of with you on that. But I mean, you can see, so maybe to extrapolate here, because the reason why everyone loves these business models of buy now, pay later is because essentially when you include that as an option, the cart size goes up, right, on an e-commerce site by like 40, 50%. That's why it's so alluring. And actually, the other thing that we should talk about as well, this just got announced with Apple's big thing, is that Apple is getting into the buy now, pay later space. I don't know if you saw
for
that.
Sure. And I guess now that when I think about it, I misspoke. It's you're not paying interest per se, but you are, in the sense of the companies will, because someone's paying the interest on the money, right? So someone's borrowing the money to give to the company, and then, to your point, they package up the loans and they tranche them out, and so there's a financial engineering that's going on, and I guess the thesis is that the cost of money to those big borrowers is lower than using a credit card, which is true, but prices will adjust to recapture that amount that you're losing, because you're paying the cost of acquisition to the tech company. And so over the long term, I don't believe you save money. It's like, the layaway process in the old days. When I was growing up, you put it behind the counter and then you paid for it over a period of time and then you got it at the end. Now you get to take it with you and use it while you pay. But I don't know. I'm very suspect of anything that finances, to your point, low quality borrowers.
Right.
And that's a mean thing to say, but it's just fact, right? I mean, if 38% are saying it's to buy things that I really can't afford, just think about that sentence. It's like somebody tweeted at me today. I said that tech valuations were still too high. He said, "What are you talking about? Amazon's only selling at 55 times. That's low compared to the last 10 years. I'm like, are you joking? Can you read what you just said?
Okay. This is a really good point, and actually something that I keep hearing. And, people keep talking about it's like, okay, I've been listening to, there's a guy, Brad Gerstner, who's a really smart guy. He's founder of Altimeter Capital, really sharp hedge fund. As far as I know some of the folks there, and as far as I can tell, they're real sharks, really smart guys. I listened to him talk about this idea of, we aren't there yet, but eventually, by maybe fall of this year, investors will feel comfortable underwriting to the 5-year average. But I'm just sitting there thinking, in my mind, the absolute worst case, that we're talking about here is underwriting to as if we just continue to grow on the same trajectory that we've been growing for the last 13 years. It's like no one can even mentally prepare for the idea that it could go lower than that, right? That's not how it works. It corrects to the upside, then the downside, then we go back to the average.
But the worst part is again, people just can't, and it's not their fault, right? People only use short periods of time, like the last 10 years. Oh, that seems like a long time. First of all, that's not a long time. Second of all, that data is polluted by QE, right? Because we held interest rates down, that boosted people's perception of the future value, even though low interest rates are a sign of economic weakness in the future. So you should actually discount, not expand. But the joke of it is that to say that for 10 years we were idiots to pay 100 times earnings for companies, okay, which has never been a good idea, or 20 times revenues, or even 100 times revenues in some cases. And that 55 is lower than that. It's like, no. What's the growth rate of that company? What is the growth rate? Is it 5%? Is it 8%? Is it 10%? It sure ain't 50%. Amazon is not growing 50%. It's just not. Apple is not growing 25%. And yet the PE is still 25. And you can engineer Amazon, we split our stock. So yay, we're more valuable. Are you joking?
Hmm.
A stock split doesn't create value, doesn't destroy value, but doesn't create value. It just gives you this illusion that, oh, well, the stock price has to go up because number only go up. Well, right, but number go up could also include, and will also include, and I'll argue we are there, a 10-year or longer period, 20 years if you're a Microsoft or Cisco, where you don't get back to the old high.
I thought just on your idea about stock splits, I don't know if you saw Shopify announced a 10-to-1 stock split.
Of course they did.
And I was just like, that's the solution? The stock's down like 90%. And it's just like, oh, do a stock split. I mean, I don't think that's going to keep working, not like, when Tesla announced its stock split and went up like 10% that day. I just don't think we're in that environment anymore. But
look, at some point, madness wears off. The problem is people go mad in crowds and they only come to their senses one by one. It's not like we all wake up and say, oh, geez, paying 55 times for something growing 20% is a bad trade. We just don't get there. And, Tesla, another one, right? I think it was up this morning for some reason, like their production in China went up. But the valuation of Tesla still sucks. And it's down a lot from where it was. And people say, oh, but it's still up over the last. And I'm like, yeah, I got you. But trust me, when we're done with this cycle, and we're not done, when we're done with this cycle, this economic cycle, and we have the recession, and we have the cleansing, and we have the credit spread blow up like you talked about, when all that happens, we will look back and with incredulity, we're like, oh, we knew that was going to happen. Like, well, but you didn't prepare for it, and you just held all the stuff that went down. So whatever.
Yeah, I've noticed that the further away you get from these sorts of crises, the more everyone just says I was on the right side of that, even though no one at the time ever does.
Revisionist history is unbelievable.
If you just took people at their word, the way they talk about it, everyone was on the right side of the great financial crisis now. And
100%.
And this is a bother with me about Terra too. It's like, look, I understand the pressure to not say negative things in crypto. I think it's a kind of a problem in crypto in general. But like the way it gets portrayed is like everyone knew that this was a Ponzi that was gonna collapse, and it's like that's not the case. Like I've been around here, I've been paying attention. I mean, I know there were concerns, and some people did voice those concerns. Gigantic rebirth, Galoy, but I just want to tie the bow on this whole consumer credit thing that we're talking about. Then we've got one more hedge fund story that I want to move on to get your take on. But in general, what I'd love to know is, because you could look at this consumer credit. I just want to know how you think about consumer credit here. Is this because on the one hand, you could look at this and say, hey, we're heading into a recession, which means that people default on things like credit cards, and that could cause some sort of cascade, right? That could be the whole credit system is interconnected, right? So what you definitely don't want is a whole bunch of defaults, banks taking losses, et cetera, especially in a time that's pretty bad for banks in general. The other way that you could look at it is to say, again, the Fed will look at this and say, credit is still being created. Look, people are still spending. We're not doing enough. So what is the way? Like, should we be worried about some sort of contagion with the bubble in consumer credit? Should we say, hey, the Fed will still look at this and say, hey, we're not going far enough? Like, what's the bow here that we should be looking at this with?
So again, the analysis is perfect. It's both, right? I mean, both are going to happen. The Fed is going to interpret incorrectly that rising credit creation, even if it's subprime credit, and even if it's a net negative in the sense that you buy a wasting asset on credit, paying high interest rates, so that asset depreciates in value, right? You're not buying an appreciating asset like a house or a collectible. You're buying things that get used up, like food, you consume it, or like a movie. It cost me $20, which was worth every penny to go to Top Gun Maverick in IMAX. Don't see it any other way.
I heard
so
that's
good.
So good.
So good. I mean, so good. But but those are wasting assets, and then you got to pay for it over a long period of time. And you're going to pay rising interest rates. So yeah, the Fed will make that mistake. But then on the flip side, to your point, the defaults will happen, right? I mean, when people borrow too much on credit cards, the nice thing about a credit card, you can default without that much pain. I mean, in theory, you got to do the personal bankruptcy and all that stuff. But even that isn't like it used to be. It used to be 7 years in debtor's prison and you just couldn't get any credit. Now you can get credit within like 18, 24 months.
Yeah.
So, but that definitely will happen. And then there'll be the contagion effect. But I don't think we're going to get there. I don't think we're going to get to the extreme because I think the Fed's going to pivot right before the election. They're going to try to save the Dems, which I don't think they'll be able to, but I think they'll try. And I think we're going to have a reversal in policy, and we will bail out the worst of the worst again, and we'll just extend and pretend. It's funny. We're clean. My son is 11, and so he just yesterday graduated, which I didn't know you could do, from 5th grade. So he's off to middle school next year. Mm-hmm. And so to celebrate that, he gets to move into his older brother's big room. So he's been in the little room.
Congratulations, Will.
Now he gets the big room. And so we were, going through his stuff and what do you want to keep? And he had this whole bunch of participation trophies. And I've told the story that the first one he got when he was 4, I brought home and his team went 0-10. And I took it and I put it in the trash. You don't get a medal for 0-10. But he had a bunch of others. And he looked at him and like, no, throw them away. And like that's where we are. We're still in that participation trophy world. And we don't punish the bad actors. We don't, we celebrate the nonsense. Like, how many people spent time watching this stupid trial? Oh my God. It makes my head hurt. So